Hi, guys. So, next session, C2PA. It's not a protocol droid, it's an alliance for restoring freedom. I just can't resist a Star Wars joke. I've got to do it. I can't stop myself. Anyway, we're going to talk about C2PA, what it is, and what kind of the latest is about C2PA and similar protocols that are helping content providers and audiences track where content has come from and who touched it and what's happened to it along the whole supply chain. We've got Felipe Dana from AP, Nathan Freitas from the Guardian Project, and Helga Osvela from Media Cluster Norway. Hi, guys.
Hello.
That is the Guardian Project and Proof Mode, I should say, Nathan. I'm sorry. Yeah, could you maybe give us a quick couple sentences about what you do and who you are, and then we'll jump in.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Nathan Freitas. I founded a group called Guardian Project 15 years ago to build on free and open source software focused on human rights and humanitarian applications. Early in that work, we realized that smartphones were also smart cameras and started building provenance and authentication tech about 10 years ago. We work with witness.org, who's been pretty prominent in this space. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Felipe.
Hi, I'm Felipe Dana. I lead field innovation at the Associated Press. I work very closely with our newsroom and technology teams to research and implement tools that enhance our workflows and support our journalists in the field. This is one of them.
Amazing. And you want to pull a surprise or two, right? For your work in Ukraine. Helga.
Yeah, my name is Helge. I am the CEO of Media Cluster Norway. We're a cluster consisting of newsrooms, media tech organizations, and academic partners. And we have a big push to implement C2PA in the Norwegian news ecosystem. Our big hairy goal is 80% adoption by the end of next year.
Amazing. Okay, great. So I guess to jump in, who wants to do like 20 seconds on what C2PA is for those who don't know? I assume a lot of the people here will have some idea, but who wants to jump in and do that?
Well, I have a way to sort of a way to talk about it generally. So you'll remember when the web used to be HTTP and very little HTTPS. So you had this sort of unprotected, unencrypted web. And we all said, let's move to HTTPS. Remember when we used to just text and think that was good enough and said, well, we need encryption. We all moved to Signal and WhatsApp. So in a sense, if you know what EXIF is or image metadata, that's like the unencrypted version, and C2PA is adding encryption and security on top of that. That's one way. And I don't know if the others want to take a pass, but I see it as a way of adding much needed authentication and security capabilities along with all the other metadata layers to visual media. Well, not visual media, content of any kind.
Yeah. So one of Felipe's colleagues at AFP, he described it as a form of identity card. Like you can look up the identity card and you can see is this person over 21? Can you buy liquor or not? The same way with the C2PA information and image, you can look it up and you can see was this taken by a camera or was it created by Gen AI?
Felipe, do you have anything to add to that?
I think they're right, and I can go back a little bit to what Manny was saying just previously about the arms race, and I think it's good to understand that C2PA, when we talk about detecting fake content, C2PA to me is the other side of it is instead of trying to detect if it's fake or not, is identify and learn about the provenance, where it came from. And basically, this for us, for example, works together with the detection tools. So it's kind of a complementary approach to combat disinformation and fake news and yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, if I can just jump in, I think like I saw some weird stat the other day that like 99% of all content on the internet is going to be Gen AI created somehow, right? So like. There's all this kind of noise out there that we cannot control. So instead of trying to control the noise, we really have to try to control the signal. And by adding this kind of provenance information onto the trustworthy content of real newsrooms with real images, that's the way for our good content, the signal to stand out in all this noise.
So how does that, in terms of practically speaking, how is C2PA working, and what are the practical examples of like how it's being used, or how I, as a content creator, a content owner, can be and should be thinking about using it, and kind of where are we in the evolution of it? I know we're still probably early days.
Going to start on that is a long answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have
Go ahead.
25 minutes. Go.
I can just say, for example, we're working closely with camera manufacturers. Let's begin from the beginning, right? Camera manufacturers, for example, implementing C2PA in their cameras. If you have that from the camera, ideally, whatever happens next to that image, let's say it's edited through a software that also maintains that C2PA metadata, and then it's published by a news organization like DAP or others that will maintain that metadata or continue to stamp that metadata. So at the end customer or our clients, other news organizations that are using that content, can track the provenance of that. So that would be a very, very simple explanation of that, what that could mean. And then, of course, depending on the implementation of that, if news outlets or social media platforms or websites, whatever it is online, implement ways to check that, and you have all that information. I think, I don't know, that's a very, very brief overview, but
is that actually happening now?
It is possible already. It is happening.
So
of course, I mean, in my opinion, for C2PA to succeed as a standard, that it needs a lot more, and it needs to be widely adopted and implemented. So everyone, I like to compare it to, I think I saw someone speaking about that the other day. They used a very good analogy to me, that nowadays when you go to the pharmacy and you buy medicine, you expect to be sealed, have a seal. You're not going to buy medicine if you don't identify a seal. Hopefully, if I'm very optimistic, in the future, when you see an image, you're going to expect for it to be sealed, so you can see where it came from and track the provenance of it, and that would be normal. But that is a distant future, to be clear. But it's already working, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
if we can just jump in, I think like what Felipe is describing is like this kind of end goal of a glass-to-glass adaptation of C2PA from the camera lens to the mobile phones of the end user. And for that to work, like everything, all the parts in between, ideally has to kind of work with it, all the MOM systems and the CMSs and everything. And I think even though there are, I think we're seeing a lot more adoption also from on the vendor side. I think it's very few of big publisher has like a perfect kind of glass-to-glass system today. But we have seen some proof of concepts that it can work for sure. But what I really think that we're going to see a lot more of in this coming year is what we like to talk about as kind of stamping content at the end of publication. So even if there's not this kind of perfect chain going all the way from camera to the MAM system to the CMSs and out to the published article, I think that we're going to see a lot of publishers just kind of asserting that yes, this image is coming from, let's say, the NRK, and it is taken in Ukraine, and we put our reputation on the line, saying it's that. So even if you can't kind of trace the whole kind of identity of the image, you can be sure that this is the real news image from the Ukraine, because we at the NRK tell you so. And then it becomes a question, of course, whether or not you trust the NRK or whatever other news organization. And I think the widespread adaptation of the real glass-to-glass implementation of C2PA will kind of strengthen the transparency of how newsrooms work, and will build even more trust.
So it's kind of, in a way, it's almost like, where's the responsibility is kind of what it says. It's like, who's taking responsibility of this at a certain point? Who was there and can vouch for this having happened?
Yeah, I think in our experience with proof mode, there's plenty of systems for trust and reputation among humans and organizations and companies. This is meant to enhance that so that there isn't a question about, well, where did this JPEG file come from, and where did it sit, and was it edited? And there's a concept in US federal law of self-authenticating evidence, right? And this is evidence that comes packaged with digital signatures and notarizations, right? And so that you don't have to go through a whole forensic process to say, was this manipulated? And in our work with Starling Labs and Stanford and others in Ukraine, this is what we achieved using, the Proof Mode app and a version of Signal that had Proof Mode built in as a prototype. And you would capture the evidence on the ground in Kharkiv. It would submit over Signal, get stamped again by a server process by a bot, and then that would go into an evidence chain that was eventually submitted to the ICC. And yeah, we had to write a dossier kind of briefing document to explain all of this, but that's the bundle that was submitted. And in 10 years, when justice is sought, we'll be able to rely on that. So I think there is things happening today. I also shout out to this great, another Norwegian organization company, Cutting Room. They incorporated our C2PA SDK. And so you can right now go install their app on iOS and captures broadcast grade video with C2PA credentials built in. And that's kind of your B-roll, your raw shots, right, before sending it to the cloud for editing. So there, it might not, in the future, they'll maintain that chain, but we already have professional software and capture systems on smartphones. Real world right now, you can go use it. So
can you talk a bit about proof modes?
Yeah, I mean, this is just, again, open source, yay. But I also agree with it's not just about yay, it's open source. There's so much more work to do. But yeah, we've been building variations on camera and verification software for years. Proof Mode is our sort of stack of tools. And one is there's an app, Android and iPhone. It's photos and video capture camera, and it embeds. We sort of had our own standard, and now we're just all in on C2PA because we see the benefit of mass adoption. So, and that's been used to document humanitarian relief efforts, land rights disputes in Latin America, election in Venezuela, and many more. It's lots of people using it for lots of things. Lawyers in Sri Lanka documenting cases. So yeah, it's out there, and we have the best news that I can share is that our work on this has now been contributed to the official Content Authenticity Initiative's SDK. So our pioneering work in mobile, bringing this to phones, is now available to everyone through our SDK, but also through the official one that Adobe and others back. So we really also see this spreading by having more apps building this in more places. And in the past, our code has been adopted from everyone from Signal and Tor Project to WeChat and Grindr. So I think we're thinking that broadly, right? I mean, if you're on Grindr and or Tinder and you want to make sure a profile is a real photo of a real person, you might want C2PA as part of that, for instance. So there's the potential applications are quite broad.
But that's also the thing you were talking about. The massive bulk of content being AI content. Yeah. That it's and I think probably a lot of that will be just people producing, just typing away on my machine, throwing stuff out there, And so I guess, is it really important to get these tools kind of in the hands of regular people or, everyday users? Is that at least as important as having newsrooms?
Yeah, I mean, that's our current effort. It's just have something out there that in a crisis or in a moment, lots of people can get for free. But we also believe that the major phone manufacturers and camera it's just going to be there. It's not that hard to implement in the end. If you have you have to do it well and do it securely, and there's a conformance process coming. So yeah, we think it'll be again, the new standard baseline on top of EXIF and other things, and it'll just be there. Ironically, right now, probably the biggest publisher of C2PA data is OpenAI and Runway, because they're tagging everything already, right? So, again, we want everything should be tagged, and I think we have to just make it free, so it's just built in. So.
That's a
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a very important point that I like to always talk about this, what Nathan just said, that C2PA is not just for real content, let's say, or, AI generated content is, C2PA can be used for AI and is used, as Nathan just said. In fact, many of these Gen AI companies are part of the C2PA coalition, and as he just said, are stamping C2PA to their content. So it's not about whether the content is real or not. It's about you identifying the provenance of that content and then deciding for yourself if you trust, that news organization that published that content, or knowing, oh, this came from OpenAI or another Gen AI tool. So that's a very important distinction that I think we should always talk about.
Because I think ultimately the trust doesn't necessarily just lie in the content; it lies on who is kind of transmitting it, right? If there's like a newsroom that I know and trust, and that their kind of promise to me is that they will never distribute images made by Gen AI, I can choose to kind of trust that news organization, and then maybe I don't want to kind of dive deep into every image, but I at least I know that this image has been signed by my trusted news organization. So it becomes kind of like a trust signal, like a vector for trust, and for someone that you already have trust in.
It feels like it's almost like it's not a tech, it's like a method. It's like the C2PA way you do things more than.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many great people have worked, like ridiculously hard to create the standard, as well as some of the other things like this creator's assertion piece of it. There's lots of little puzzles. And one of the reasons we just gave up on our own efforts was we're just like, wow, this actually has come together in a really smart way. Because we're not just talking about one stamp, we're talking about a manifest is a chain of stamps. And so that sort of stamp at the glass, that stamp maybe in the middle when you want to add some other data that, yes, you cropped it, but that's okay. Let's stamp it that you did that. And then the final endorsement by the editor, that's all really important. And then beyond that, going into this topic of IP and, maybe you want people to remix or use your works another way. Well, you want that IP, that chain to continue, and that all the ingredients into a creative process that even a news organization in a sort of piece might do a more creative process to present the news, but you want that provenance to continue. And I know Will from Hand and others are thinking about, well, who appears in that? And I have my own identity because you interviewed me. Maybe my identity goes in as another signature. Mm-hmm. So intent and consent can also fit in this framework. So I agree. It's a way of thinking about, that sounds really complicated, but I can assure you that, again, understanding how like the encryption protocol behind Signal was designed, that's insanely complicated. But now we just use it. Billions of people use it in WhatsApp and Signal every day without thinking. Mm-hmm. So I know we can get there, and I'm excited for all the modular stuff we can plug in.
So should we be doing you're talking about the work you're doing like collecting materials in Kharkiv and how that may be useful in the future for documenting what has happened. Should I just be trying to stick C2PA into everything I do now, just as a private individual, just so that my stuff that I'm doing now doesn't kind of get lost in this as just one more image that was probably AI or probably not, or who cares? I don't know.
Yeah, just shout out to Manny mentioned something like this about stuff from the past. And yeah, I think there's I feel an urgency. I feel that sort of I call it the jackpot moment. It's a from a William Gibson book. I don't think that's the right term, but there's that moment, that place of no return that makes me nervous, especially when Veo 3 came out. I was like, oh no. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I have that feeling.
Yeah, and I think there's like a real kind of fight now for like what is our kind of common reality that we can share and kind of agree on. And it's not only kind of stuff that's happening now. Was this like a real image taken in Iran, or is it by Gen AI? But it's also kind of a fight about their past. Like these generative AI models are like so good now that like suddenly there are spaceships in San Francisco in 1924, and I didn't really know that they were there.
Yeah.
So I think there's also a real lots of good use cases for like archives, like the AFPs, the APs, the big broadcasters of the world. They kind of sit on our collective consciousness in a way, right? Like our history. And there's also like a use case for C2PA there to kind of stamp the content upon retrieving it from the archives and saying this was really taken up from the BBC archive, and the original date of recording was 1946 or something like that. So yeah, I think there's lots of different ways to kind of implement this into existing workflows.
There's a, I mean, just last week or week before, I was looking. There was an image that was of burning cars and chaos and people on tops, with Mexican flags, and it was a nightmare. And it was obviously, or at least maybe not, it was obvious to me that it had just been cobbled together with a little bit of AI and stuff and slapped up on Newsmax to paint a picture of what was going on in LA. You know, um, and it was it was there as I think it was a thumbnail on a video. Um, and there's a lot of people looking at that, and it has an impact. And that thing of like whether or not that is really real or not real or whatever, it still has had that impact. And is there something as well, and we can talk about this maybe in our conclusion as well, but about being able to get on, having some mechanism that isn't long term, but that you can immediately have at least a sense of the thing I'm looking at is fake, even though I'm still being affected by it. At least having to have a red light or green light attached to content as you see it. If that makes sense.
I kind of think that we're going to go from where this world where there's like so many images, and to a world where it's not necessarily that you're going to be looking for that kind of CR icon or whatever. We end up with the kind of signals that there's C2PA here, but you really but that will become the norm, and that's really what you expect to see, as Nathan's HTTPS example is, right? And it's all this other content that doesn't have this this icon or this kind of trust signal. It's those things that you kind of will start to kind of filter out and say like, okay, this must be some AI slop that I don't want to deal with. So I think Daniel also asks like a very interesting question in the chat about adaptation, like the main obstacle to adaptation. And I myself, I'm very positive that we're gonna be seeing like a lot of adaptation in the coming year. There has been some issues on how to kind of handle identity assertion in this 2.x spec. But I'm pretty confident that we're gonna get to a place where like a lot of big newsrooms are gonna say, okay, we are gonna really go for this, especially at the end, at the stamping it at the end of publishing phase at least.
I think it's going to be Grinder. I think it's that mainstream thing of like, no, dude, send me a photo. I think it's going to be
Grindr, shout out. They're very progressive, thinking about unique security threats.
Yeah.
Especially some of their users are in places in the world that's not very safe for them.
Yeah.
And so you never know who the champions of important new tech will be. Obviously, I think the news industry has really been getting on board, and
yeah, of course.
We're hoping I think there's a huge user experience part of all of this. The way LinkedIn does it versus Instagram dabbled in it, and YouTube has their own approach, and we have our own approach. We're all trying to figure out what is the UX, and it's gonna, again, like all of these other things. I remember early in encrypted messaging, the whole thing was like, you can't have an encrypted chat until you verify keys. So we had this whole process of like scanning and keys, and everyone's like, this is so confusing, like PGP era kind of stuff too. No one wants to do it, right? And then, even when Signal came out first, there was a little bit of like, ooh, make sure you trust this person. And that has kind of gone away, right? And there's just this like, look, this is pretty good for edge cases where you have to be really worried. There's some extra stuff, but let's just like streamline this and not, add cognitive load to people.
Mhm.
So I think, the idea of the CR stamp and some other stuff, there's some other ways that we're all, I think, sorting this out. But yeah, definitely time also for the designers and UX and sociologists to get involved.
Well, that's it for now. We'll hopefully see you, though, at our wrap up at the end. Thank you so much, Felipe, Nathan, Helga. And let's move on to our next session.